Timber frame is brilliant for self-builders, and here's a few tips for timber frame building, starting with the floor. And I wish someone had told me when I was starting out. I had to learn the hard way. Now you'll need these fold-over joist hangers along with large-headed, sheriddized and twisted head nails. And we use twisted nails since these grab into the wood because they're square in section as opposed to your standard round nail, and therefore they offer a stronger grip into the joist. And these come in kilogram bags, and that means you'll get in the region of about 370 nails per kilogram. And that sounds a lot, but since we're using 40 nails for every joist, that's 20 both sides, after 10 joists they're all gone. Now don't ever use screws for joist hangers. Screws are great for pressing things together where the forces are in one direction, like in compression. But with joists, you've got a whole load of bending and elastic bounce, people walking along the middle of the floor, walls carrying the roof, wind loads pushing horizontally. So the joists and the fixings that keep them in place need to be able to flex because they're being pushed and pulled in all directions. Now back to the twisted head concept. In this situation, screws by their very nature can't be elastic due to the precision requirement of them having these threads. Because of that, screws are brittle and they're therefore going to snap rather than flex when you get the bounce of the joists. Nails are a really important part of timber frame construction, and because timber frame is the best way for a self-builder, it's worth learning a little bit about them. Nails have an elasticity to them, but they also have the inherent strength that screws have, and therefore they work great in both compression and tension. Perfect for side-on fixings where you've got a load of bounce like these joist hangers. We choose annular nails for fixing sheet material like OSB if you don't want to screw it, and the rings on the shaft give it the grip. But for here, the twisted profile is great for securing brackets such as joist hangers. And a mistake I've seen from self-builders and short-cutting joiners is their choice of joist hanger. Fold-over joist hangers, if you've ever had to fix them, are a total pain in the backside. You have to first start by fixing them onto the loose joist, and then make sure you get the right thickness of hanger for the joist. And what makes it more problematic is the thickness that is stated by the merchant for the joist is never the actual thickness. Here they said 47 millimeters for these C16s, but it's actually 44 millimeters when I'm measuring it with my set square, and that 3 millimeters really does matter. The temptation is to look for easier solutions like these bracket hangers. They allow you to get the joists in place first on the frame and then slide the hanger underneath and fix it, making everything a lot faster and a lot less cumbersome on your back. However, the likelihood of you getting squeaky joists is much higher with this hanger, and I don't know why you would compromise on something so important as using a decking hanger when you should be using proper joist hangers. Stick to doing it right, use the correct joist hangers, and accept the fact that you're going to need 20 nails for every joist hanger, so that's 40 slugs with the hammer for every single joist. Embrace the discipline and use the repetition of the hammer strokes to get closer to your inner self. And about that hammer, I deliberately chose a cheap and cheerful $6.99 claw hammer when I was filming this, since one of these is in every home builder's toolbox. But I would always choose a framing hammer for this type of work. And if you're going to get a decent framing hammer, you're looking at a bit more of an investment, but it really will help your workflow, especially if you're going to be building a timber frame structure where you're going to be doing the joists, roofs, walls, floors, all that sort of stuff. I'll leave a link below to some fantastic ones that I use. But for the home builder and DIY enthusiast, you've got to pick your battles where budget is tight, and these claw hammers can get the job done if it's just this one project that you're doing. They're just not great over a prolonged period. Now back to your joists, I'll always do my spacing at 400 centres rather than 600 to eliminate any bounce. And I can't emphasise how important it is to get rid of bounce. For stud walls and the roof joists, I'll aim for 600mm spacings since I'm never walking on them. But for joists, I'll actually do them at 400mm plus the thickness of the joist, in this case 44mm. So 444mm spacing or centres. And if you're working on a ground floor, it's especially important to get your spacing super accurate. And now here I'll be putting rigid insulation between these joists, and because rigid insulation is so expensive and such a pain in the backside to cut, I want to reduce the amount of work and expense and eliminate any wastage, at the same time keeping the amount of cuts of the insulation sheet to the bare minimum. And I do that by making the cuts and an exact division of the size of the sheet. So 400mm gives you 3 identical cuts in one direction or 6 identical cuts in the shorter direction, depending on the length of your joists. If I were using mineral wool insulation, it's not such a big deal. You can just squeeze it into place, except from a thermal point of view, way too much heat loss and really not worth the penny pinching. Next mistake I see is that self-builders measure out the joist from the previous joist, and the problem there is by the time you get to the end, it's a bit like Chinese whispers. The dimension that you've got at the end is nothing like what you started with, because you're always 1 or 2mm out, which just compounds the error as you go along, exaggerating itself towards the end. The way to centre your joists is to use what we call running dimensions. So calculate the accumulating dimension. I'm using a spreadsheet. You can just do it with a calculator and then write it down on a bit of paper or put it on your phone, print it out, whatever, and then hook the measure at the starting point and go along the whole length with the running dimension and marking centres using the numbers you've noted. That way, even if one of your joists is out, the next joist will be accurate and you will have much less hassle in cutting the insulation. You need to get your joists running at right angles to the frame, so we need to measure our centres down both sides and then use our speed square to draw a perpendicular line. Normally I'd use a carpenter's pencil for this, sharpened with my lovely Stanley knife. I love this one here, again I'll leave a link. Be careful with the marker, since its rounded thick tip will lose you a few millimetres of accuracy. A new Sharpie tip is okay, but pencil is always best. I'm using the Sharpie here to make it show up for the camera. Place a cross on the side where the joists will sit. No need to measure the thickness. Now to cut the joists. Measure your joist length and, really important, add 2 to 3mm to it, and that way you can friction fit it accurately by tapping it into place with your hammer. And this flexible nature of timber is what makes it such a pleasure to work with in construction. I love working with timber and I love working with timber frame, and I hope you will too. Before we put the joists in place, we need to fix our joist hangers. Start with nailing the 2 holes in the underside of the joists, making sure to be a few millimetres south of the cut edge of the joist. Then do the sides of each hanger, same for the other end. Then line the joists up with your pencil lines, and because you oversized, you can gently tap the joist into the exact position. Make sure to get it level in both directions. If it's not vertical, you'll have a horrible headache with any rigid insulation when you try and get it in. Then I'll go along doing the same for the next one. I'll use a spacing block cut to 400mm only as a check. I'll stick to my running dimensions always. For this particular floor frame, I'm using 95mm joists due to the short spans, so I'm having to snip the top of the projecting bracket to enable me to fold the metal down. I'm just using a pair of tin snips for that. You won't have this problem if you're using 120mm joists and above. And final tip, I've been on plenty of sites, even with experienced joiners who haven't used all the nail holes in the joists. Shortcut after shortcut after shortcut means death by 1,000 cuts. Love your work, do it properly, enjoy the process as much as the finished result. Give me a thumbs up on this video and I'll try and give you more tips like this when I see you in the next one.